Good morning, Oneness, and good morning, all of our viewers live and later. It's a beautiful day. And Kara, I want to thank you for that amazing meditation and prayer. It truly speaks to the heart of this teaching and to the heart and experience in our country this week. And so let's stay centered in our truth. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And in our lesson today, let's be thinking about that truth. I am a spiritual being having a human experience, and I know that there is a power for good that we can use for definite purpose. And I am choosing, despite the pain, despite the concern, despite whatever ripples at times may feel like a tsunami, that I can choose to use this power for good. And so let's dig in and learn more about how we can do that. Last week we started the year last week, and we talked about the thing itself, because in January, what we are doing is we are following a tradition in which it's been a sort of almost a ritual in Science of Mind to dedicate January to those first 4 parts of the introduction. Small, powerful sections of the Science of Mind, which we refer to as our text. It was the original publishing on this teaching by Ernest Holmes. So just as a review, we have discussed the nature of the thing as being universal energy, mind, intelligence, spirit, that thing that we call God, finding the consciousness and individualized centers of expression through us. That word through us is so key to everything. And that human's intelligence is this universal mind functioning at the human concept, at the human level. So remember, we talked about that there's universal mind, and there are localized, or there are aspects of mind that may be focused or associated with, say, family, work, our nation, etc., and ourselves. That there is a mass consciousness, a human mind that is a collective of all human thoughts, beliefs, and feelings, whether we are aware of that or not. And at the individual level, we have our own individual mind. Now, our own individual mind is not universal mind. It is our use of that. Our individual mind is our use of mass consciousness. And the great thing about it is we have the power to choose. But boy, we can get so blown off track. You know, some things that feel like ripples can be tsunamis. I had one of those this week, I admit it. And when we look at the events of this week, I don't know for sure, I'm guessing each one of us has been deeply touched and concerned. And I'm only guessing at the range of emotions. So let's think about this week, the way it works. So last week we talked about the thing itself, what is it? And I remember using my mouse and saying, okay, this is the thing itself. Now, how do we use it? How does it work? Before I can use it, I need to know how it works, right? And so I invite you to stay partially with this week's events in our capital in mind as we go through our talk today. Now, Ernest Holmes primarily focused on our individual use of the thing itself. That's where we have agency, is ourself. That's our sovereignty. And that's where we have authority to choose. And yet at the same time, we are interconnected as part of the oneness of all creation as part of the oneness of humans as well. So we have some dual action going on there as well, but it starts here. It starts within each and every one of us. So as we step into how what it is this week, what it is, and the way it works. God is, we start by understanding, Ernest Holmes says to us, God is universal and unlimited. Universal and unlimited. Some of the other words we attach to this concept of God is infinite and eternal, absolute. In other words, saying God is all that is. God is the source, the origin of all creation. God is all wisdom, all care, all healing, all answers, and is always and only love. By saying that it's universal, it means that it is everywhere present, everywhere active, everywhere available, and at the ready. And it is always coming forth as we invoke it, as we call upon it in every moment. So yes, that means that God was there in the capital. God was there in every aspect, every person, every action that took place. It doesn't mean that God was doing that. That's where there's a lot of confusion. It doesn't mean that God sponsored that. It doesn't mean that God was behind that. It means that God was present, always is present, and that God can be invoked everywhere, anywhere, in any moment. It waits. It's in the ready. It's in the ready, just like a field of energy. It is a field of energy. It's up to us to call upon it, to invoke it through our thoughts, beliefs, and feelings. And that's why it's so important to be conscious of what we're thinking and feeling, and conscious and intentional in what we're choosing to think and believe. Ernest Holmes goes on to say that this universal good that is God, everywhere present, everywhere active, everywhere available in every moment, is ours to the extent that we are willing to receive. Now, what that means is, remember last week I talked about the fisherman who was catching fish, and he would measure every fish, and the big ones he would throw back into the river, and he would only keep the small ones. And a bystander said, help me out, help me understand why you're doing this. And he said, well, my frying pan is only this big. So what Holmes is saying is that this universal good is really unlimited. It's infinite. It's absolute. Look at all of creation. And if we're only thinking this, that's the extent of what we can receive. So it becomes part of our beingness, our presence, our awareness, our consciousness to say, if I expand my beliefs, my consciousness, I can bring more good into my life experience and into the good and experience that I bring to the world. I can expand my talent. I can expand my gift of service to the world and who I am by embodying more of that God presence. Now, Troward is one of the main influences of Ernest Holmes' work, The Science of Mind. He was a lawyer who worked in India, was stationed in India for most of his career, and then returned to London. And through that, he gained some of the knowledge of Eastern thought and Eastern spiritual traditions. And Troward also works at places almost like a geometry proof. So he's very logical and methodical, and he starts his work, the Edinburgh lectures, by saying there can be only one infinite. Now that sounds simple, but that is a foundation concept. There can be only one infinite. So when we hear from the Bible about serving more than one God, and we think of the idea of good and evil in spiritual traditions that believe that evil is a force unto itself, Troward says, it's all or nothing. Either God is all that is and God is infinite, or God isn't God. Please take that in and consider that whenever any of us, I do it myself, and I have to catch myself out and reel it back in when I'm giving my power somewhere else. So Holmes goes on to say, he actually gives us a little equation, which I think is a little nod to Troward, in which he says, basically it's all or nothing. Spirit or God plus zero, because there isn't anything else. Spirit and God are all that is. What's the result of spirit plus zero, God plus zero? It's God, it's spirit. There can be only one infinite, and that infinite is absolute and all powerful. So remembering that God is all of each of us, but we are only part of God. That's like saying, I know there's often the ocean, the water drop analogy, but let's think more closely, like to our yard. It's like we are a blade of grass in our yard. We're not the whole yard. And yet we are in oneness with that yard. So Holmes offers this up. He says, we can only see it, the thing itself, the it in the thing itself, that is part of his word for God. We can only see it through our eyes. And we know from our life experience that we have sort of conditional sight, right? Not only the physical sight, but our insight, what we understand, what we choose to believe, the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves or about others, the stories we make up, is part of our filter. But we can change that. Here's what he says in the text. We shall find a better God when we shall have arrived at a higher standard for humans. That's an interesting statement. If God is to interpret itself to humans, God must do that through us. And so we receive to the extent of our thinking, of our consciousness. And so that is part of why, that is a big part of why we come into faith and come into this tradition. Because it's like we want to realize, where have I limited myself? Where do I have a filter that's blocking something, that's inhibiting me? And how can I free myself from that? Because remember, in the first part, he says, we are born in freedom. Bondage is not God ordained. It is up to us to do the work to free ourselves and cleanse and release from those filters and stories that we have been operating with. And interestingly enough, part of what's in that background there is also the mass consciousness. And with social media, with marketing, with television ads, over the last century, it's become more powerful that mass mind, is constantly drumming at us. All the more reason for us to be mindful and intentional. Ernest Holmes says, the seed of perfection is hidden within. This original life is infinite. It is good. It is filled with peace. And I'm reading from the text. In our ignorance of the truth, we have misused the highest power we possess. And so great is this power, so complete is our freedom in it, so absolute the domain of law through it, that the misuse of this power has brought upon us the very conditions from which we suffer. That is a powerful paragraph. And it translates so powerfully to our own lives, everything we feel is amiss, and to what we witnessed this past week in our capital. So great is this power, so complete our freedom in it, so absolute the domain of law through it, that the misuse of this power through our beliefs, our thoughts, our feelings, is what has brought upon us the very conditions from which we suffer. Going back to the Bible and Jesus, this is why Jesus summed up his whole philosophy with the statement, "It is done unto you as you believe." That may seem like a cliche, but boy, is that the root of all power. It is done unto us as we believe. So we suffer not because suffering is imposed on us, but because we are ignorant of the true nature of our truth in our being. Straight from Ernest Holmes. Whoa, take a breath on that, please. Just let that settle in. I know there is a lot of depth in this talk today. And in this part 2 of the intro, which is only 5 pages long, then he reminds us, Holmes reminds us, spirit works for us. Spirit, the law, the spiritual law, works for us by working through us. The thing works for us by working through us, and it is part of us. It is us. It becomes power to us only when we recognize it. So we can just be, going along in life, tuned out, forgetting who we are, forgetting the power of our thoughts and our feelings, our judgments, our beliefs, right? And when we do, we're disempowering ourselves. We're going back to the human realm. We're operating only in the human realm. That thing about being in the world or of the world. When we're doing that, we're of the world rather than being the spiritual being in the world. So remember, the thing works for us by working through us. It becomes power to us only as we recognize it. It's like saying, do we accept it? That is the key. Remember, we can only have what we accept and allow through us. So we have to tune into that belief. And it's sort of like, let's grow that belief. If you're not there at the moment, if this is how much you trust and believe this, then okay. But, continually let that expand, entertain that as greater truth. The thing itself, becomes possibility only as we recognize it as possibility. How many times do we say, God is infinite possibility? Infinite possibility. Is our consciousness allowing us to entertain, wow, I can use this infinite power. I can use it. Let me believe that there's infinite possibility. What possibility do I want to dream up and envision and consistently intend? One of the things I do every year is to see, this is silly, but it's something that builds this a bit. And I would invite any of you to choose something that sounds sort of like, that's not going to happen, but entertain it and see what happens. So personally, I have this little game I play every year, and that is, how many cars can I see in this area in Central Maryland that have an Alaska license plate? Some years more than others. Now this year, because of COVID, my travel was very limited. Went to the same place and back, one grocery store or the other, and came back once a week. That's it. And yet I had an Alaskan license plate. I was anticipating it. I believed in the possibility of crossing paths with an Alaska license plate, despite the unlikeliness of the timing and coincidence. It happens as we believe. And so Emerson said this, because sometimes also our consciousness is, with that small frying pan, right? Whether we think that's what we deserve, that's what we're capable. Um, if it has to do with money, maybe we feel like we don't have the power to create more. Here's what Emerson says. And he's from the 1800s, and so the language is in the 1800s. He said, there is no great or no small. There's no great and no small to the soul that maketh awe. Now, our modern version of this is, in God, there is no big or small. And so think about that. Goldsmith said, God withholds nothing. It's there, that substance, that energy field, that which is all that is ever present for us. Are we allowing it, intending it, accepting it? So this invites us to think a little bigger, that there is that possibility, and I am claiming it. Then Ernest Holmes goes on to say, how much can we believe? Great segue there, because he reminds us that the law, that part of God that receives our every thought, our every feeling, our every belief, and says, yes, yes. It doesn't discriminate. It doesn't play favorites. It works. Remember, it's a spiritual principle that works the same way every time for everyone. Always, just like gravity does, right? Law obeys us. But here's this interesting little thing that we need to understand and obey it. And that word is something that really sort of grates a lot of times with people, having to obey something. But he says our obedience to the thing itself is our acceptance, our recognition, our belief that I get it. Every thought, every feeling is creating, whether I'm aware of it or not. I can be on autopilot, like when I'm phased out driving a car, but I'm still creating because I have some of those old beliefs that I may not even recognize I have. So this is the creative process. And the question again comes around to, how much do we believe? Because how much we believe is how much we receive, how much we demonstrate. It is done unto us as we believe. So the question is, what am I believing? Oops, do I really want to create that? Do I want to create more of that? Do I want to create that out in the world? So it's the law that is what works. When we think of Jesus and all that he did, all those miracles, what was behind it was the law responding, saying yes. Every one of those miracles was preceded by Jesus stating an affirmation, an intention, with that great power of faith. Now there's two, Ernest Holmes has a lot of buzzwords, and we sort of have to learn them. He talks about involution and evolution. And he has a little bit of a different take on evolution. Let's save that for another day. But involution, he says, is like invoking. It is the planting of the seed. It is our thought being planted. Our thought is the planting of the seed in universal mind. That's involution. That thought, that feeling, that belief is what is creative. And we are always thinking, always feeling, always believing. So there again, it's a question of, do I want to plant poison ivy? in my vegetable patch. I don't know, I just made that up, but you get the drift, right? Evolution is what follows. So it's like our thoughts plant a seed in universal mind, and what law does, law is the producer. It is that which says, like in my analogy with the restaurant a few months back, it's, the law is there, and we read off the menu and say, I'd like to have this today. We give that to the waiter goes off, gives it to the kitchen, the chef cooks it, the waiter delivers it. That's the part of the law that takes it off to the kitchen, cooks it up, and delivers it in our life, in our experience. So according to Holmes, evolution is what follows consciousness. Unlike other beliefs about evolution scientifically, that consciousness is built through evolution, Holmes says, no, it's the reverse. It's what is produced as a result of consciousness. So just to go through a few reminders here. God and the law have no favorites. They play no favorites. They work the same way every time, all the time, in every moment. God is never on break. The law is never on break. Always present, always active. Ignorance of the law excuses no one from its effects. So this is really important, understanding that we're operating in a field of creation that is choice and consequence. That's why we have free choice. And we are not punished by God. We are punished. We're not punished. We don't even believe in punishment. What we believe is, okay, I made that choice, and this is the result, the consequence of it. So limited beliefs will generate limited outcomes. Expanded beliefs will create expanded outcomes. And we get to choose those beliefs. We can just hit that pause button and choose the belief. And he says, you know what? He uses the word will in an interesting way as well, W-I-L-L. He says, this does not operate by muscle, by willpower, by, I'm going to make sure this, do you hear me, God? No, that doesn't work. That's not what's at work here. It's not that power muscle, like, rah. Instead, it's a consistent intention and belief. It can be ever so gently cuddled and held. It's just that consistent beacon of belief. And the more joy and love and gratitude we can enwrap with it, or feeling of gift that this is in our life and to the world, just being in that meditative place, that steady beacon, that is the use of will that Holmes is talking about. Now remember, there's only good, and that good is infinite. Emma Curtis Hopkins always said, my God is my good, and my good is my God. And when we think of Goldsmith, that God withholds nothing, then it's up to us to be checking in. Where's my belief? Is that what I want to continue to create? Because it's done unto me as I believe. But Holmes steps back from that and he says, God is good. God is infinite. That means that there is only good and there is only God. There can't be another power, right? God plus zero equals God. There can be only one infinite, and that infinite is good. So we can shed all those beliefs about things being done to us, all those limiting feelings and beliefs, the lack of possibility or whatever. We have the freedom and the power to change up our beliefs. And in choosing to do that and choosing to allow and accept that, then we are this welcome vessel through which that can come into our experience. So However, wherever you are in this moment, I ask you to just start thinking more and more into thinking, God is without limit. God is without limit. And to the extent that I can free myself of my limited beliefs, then I too become expansive. There is no evil. We can just jettison that idea of the power of evil. And Ernest Holmes says this on page 39, we experience good and evil because we are perceiving a presence of duality rather than unity. And how often do we consider, we claim all the time, oneness of all life, oneness of all energy, oneness of all God, oneness with the law ever present. Evil is the result of humans' misuse of the law. When we look over the last years, how much has there been a drumbeat every day, whether it's printed news, television, social media, wherever, of divide, of hate, of separation, a house divided. And for some, that has been more powerful than for others. But they are part of our human and all of creation. So we have agency within ourselves. That agency is powerful when we choose to say, wait a minute, I see there's pain here. I see there's misuse of thought and belief here. And if I go so far as to say, yes, I understand there's really no power of evil, but there could be malintent, even if it's ignorant in how the law was used. That gives us a different place to be present within ourselves, within our family, with whoever we have, some friction, and to be present in and with our nation, praying on behalf of our nation and all that has happened. So let's begin to believe and accept and allow more good, and that God can only do this through us. We are that vessel. By accepting, allowing, we open to let that be our truth. So in closing, I want to share with you that Jody Davidson, Claudette Gadsden, and myself, we invite you to a prayer vigil tonight at 7 p.m., where we can come together and pray for our nation. That the Sacred Activism meeting of the month is this Thursday, and we will be focusing on being present and praying for our nation. Everyone's invited as well. And that it's ours to get out of duality and judgment and be in that place of knowing the truth of who we are, the power of the thing itself, that we can use it for definite purpose. And let's use it to affirm and be a vessel, a conduit of peace, of claiming peaceful transition of power in this country, that our democracy stands is stronger, more vibrant, more resilient than ever, that our nation serves everyone to the highest, that all pain is healed. It is true. We are God in expression. The thing itself we can use for a definite purpose. We all are choosing to use it for good. God bless. Thank you. Let's pray. God is all that is and all that matters. God is that one power that is the source and substance of all creation. God is all that is. And God is that most high, most pure, that absolute, infinite, eternal, infinite and eternal, everywhere present, everywhere active, field of all good and all love. God is that from which we have come forth, that we are God in expression. And I know today that each and every one of us is choosing to be this presence to a greater degree. It is our choice. We have the freedom to do this. And we are choosing, knowing that we are the place where God stands forth. We are choosing to expand our consciousness, expand our willingness, and expand our allowing this to be our truth, and knowing that it is done with ease and grace. This comes through us, for us, and is us. And this we say yes to. We say, God, yes, I am ready for a greater experience. I am ready for greater good. I am ready for unlimited possibility. I am ready to be this conduit. And the gift of all of this that expands my life, my good, expands our life, our good, expands our nation, and all the healing that is possible, we know is now coming forward in us and through us because we choose this. Our intention is high and pure, for we are choosing this for the highest and greatest good of our country. And we start within. This is where it all starts and radiates out through each and every one of us. And we are choosing this wisdom, this understanding, knowing that as we do so, we are also building this in mass consciousness so that it becomes more and more available to everyone. And by doing this, we are also agreeing to live this forward with every thought, every belief, every action, in every moment. This is our power, this is our good, and we are blessed because God is the master creator. And we know that it is always done far greater and far better, far more wonderfully than we have the power to imagine. And so we vest our belief, our trust in this truth. We let this be, we accept, we allow, and we stand forth greater than we were when we woke up this morning. And this is our gift to the world. Thank you, God. And so it is.